Okay, I think as people come in, we'll make a start. I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Josh Taylor. I'm the research manager at the greenhouse, and I have led on this piece of work alongside the Coventry University team. I'm going to start by giving a bit of an introduction to the greenhouse and our service model, and then it will be over to Doctors Grace Carter and Sarah West to talk through what they found. So let me try the old sharing of the screen and just make sure that that is all up and running. So hopefully you can see my first slide there. Just going to move you over to here. So yeah, so welcome everybody. Yeah, continue to introduce yourselves in the chat, as Meg has said. And yeah, I will get going. So, first of all, I just wanted to give a bit of a brief history of the greenhouse. So we started in the 1980s when we were known as the Avon Sexual Abuse Centre, and we supported back then adult survivors of sexual abuse. And we continued doing that and until around 2010, when we started to also support children and young people. And that's when we formally became known as the Greenhouse. And then during 2019, it was when we moved to our new purpose-built therapy centre in St. Paul's, which is where we are today. And in 2022, faced with ever increasing wait lists, we made the decision to focus solely on supporting families, so no longer supporting adult survivors. And that decision was made so that children could have access to timely specialist support. We launched a new family model of support that recognized the need for a collective healing journey. But we didn't stop there. And in 2024, we tweaked our pathways, which originally had an offer of therapy first, and we opened it up to offer all of our support services at the front door. And that was in recognition that healing takes many forms for children and young people, and choice is really, really important in that healing journey. So what does that model look like? This is our service model. And we developed an ecological service model that offers an interconnected approach to understanding and supporting children, young people, and their families who have experienced sexual abuse. By considering the individual, relational, community, and societal levels, we ensure a holistic perspective, addressing not just the immediate effects of abuse, but also the broader context in which families live. Since the launch of this model, well, actually, you can see, or I've run through the different support types that we have here. So you can see on the left there is our ecological model, and on the right are the different types of support that we offer. So once someone's made a referral, they will then have an initial meeting, and that initial meeting is with a practitioner who will work with that family or young person to help them decide what type of support they would like. And then you can see there that those different types of support fit within different levels of our model. So at the individual level, we have our specialist creative arts therapy, which is for children and young people. And we also offer one-to-one family support work sessions for parents and carers. And we have a taste recovery online course, which is available for those on the wait lists or at any point in their journey. We then move up a level to relationships, and this is where we get some of our group programs. So, for example, we have our nature-based therapy group program, again for young children and young people. And then for parents and carers, there's a 6-week psychoeducational group that we offer. And then moving up, we go to the community level, and this is where you'll find some of our voice offerings. So we have voice groups for children for young people and a separate group for parents and carers. We also have drop-in sessions where people can turn up. They can have a cup of tea. They can talk about whatever they want to talk about. They can do something creative while they're doing that. And it's just a nice space just to sit and just be with other people that have been through similar experiences. And alongside that, we also have our offer for professionals as well within our kind of local communities. So that might be our specific consultation offer, which is one-to-one sessions for professionals, or it might be simply the kind of multi-agency work that our practitioners do as part of their support, working with other services or practitioners that might be working with that child at the same time. And then finally, we have the society level, and that's kind of where we take all of the learning from the rest of the model and kind of share it out, which is essentially what we're doing here today. So kind of promoting that best practice, sharing it within the sector as part of things like our Festival of Activism. It might be work around policy development or social media campaigns, that sort of thing. And so you can really see how all of these are kind of interconnected, and really by having offers at each of these level, you really work to support not just the young person, but in their but also kind of working in a preventative manner, looking at the community and societal issues. So since the launch of this model, we committed to evaluating the pilot, and not only to strengthen our own practice, but to help drive forward the evidence base for the sector. At the heart of this is an ambition to ensure that young survivors and their families receive effective, data-driven support that meets their needs and truly transforms outcomes. We're grateful to the UK government for funding the evaluation, and of course to the Coventry University team, who you'll meet in a second, who've done such a fantastic job in delivering it. Our biggest thanks always goes to the young people and families who've taken part, for their courage, insight, and willingness to speak up. So now I'm happy to pass over to Grace and Sarah from the Coventry team, who are going to take you through the evaluation.
Thanks so much, Josh, for that introduction. And if you could, yeah, wonderful, my slide is up. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Dr. Grace Carter, and I am an assistant professor based at the Research Centre for Healthcare and Community Transformation at Coventry University, where I led the evaluation working alongside my wonderful colleagues, Dr. Sarah West and Professor Lorna O'Doherty. Today, Sarah and I will give you an overview of the evaluation. And whilst we won't be able to go into every detail that is covered in the report, we really hope that this gives you a flavour of what we did and what we found. We want to say from the outset that the project is deeply rooted in the lived experiences and invaluable insights of young survivors and their families, as well as the practitioners and professional stakeholders linked to the greenhouse who are working to support survivors of child sexual abuse. And we extend our gratitude to all those who've taken the time to participate in the evaluation. We thank the greenhouse for their support throughout the project, for facilitating our access to data and enabling us to engage with potential contributors to the work. And we acknowledge there may be a number in our webinar today who fed directly into the evaluation, of which we are very grateful. During this presentation, we will refer to any person who has experienced child sexual abuse, or CSA, as a survivor or someone with lived experience. There might be occasions, particularly when referring to service level data, where we might refer to clients or service users, but we just want to recognise that not everyone who has experienced CSA or engaged with the greenhouse would choose to describe themselves in this way. We want to highlight as well that during our presentation, we will share some quotes from young people, from parents and carers, and from professionals about their experiences of receiving and providing support. And please do what you need this afternoon to look after yourself and be kind to yourself and engage as you feel comfortable. So over to my next slide. Well, commissioned by the Ministry of Justice through the Greenhouse, our team at Coventry were awarded funding to conduct an independent evaluation between November 2025 and March 26. And this evaluation aimed to identify and describe the whole family service model that Josh outlined, and to explore what impact it might have on healing in the aftermath of sexual abuse. We also wanted to produce a programme theory, essentially a way of explaining how the model might work for key stakeholders, some of which I've listed here, with the idea that this could inform future decisions and the development of the Greenhouse in how it supports young people and their families. The evaluation also aimed to articulate this model of practice so that it could be shared widely with external stakeholders to think more broadly about how young people and families are supported, and to inform how resources might be allocated if such a model was rolled out elsewhere. And linked to this, the evaluation aimed to contribute to the growing evidence base on what works in this context for young people and their families. To address the aims of the project, we drew on realist evaluation, which is a theory-driven approach that helps explain how and why services work, for whom, and under what circumstances. And Sarah will share a little bit more about that in a moment. But just so that you get a sense of how we did the evaluation, we adopted a mixed methods approach. So we drew on a range of different types of data to help us. So we looked at routine referral and service delivery data from the Greenhouse's reporting tools, which involved pre and post assessments based on two measures that were routinely used by practitioners to evaluate therapy outcomes. So we had the young person's score, which is a measure of well-being, and the CRISE 13, which measures the core symptom clusters of post-traumatic stress. We also analysed client feedback surveys and interviews that were completed by the Greenhouse staff at the end of an individual's instance of service involvement. We analysed policy and strategic documents that guide the operations and practices of the Greenhouse. And then we conducted one-to-one interviews with 15 of the Greenhouse staff, trustees and funders, 4 young people, and 4 parents who've engaged with the Greenhouse. We also ran workshops that, with 23 internal stakeholders to discuss the development of the programme theory and to guide revisions. And 2 young people and 1 parent have helped us develop a summary of the findings from the evaluation as well.
So just to contextualise the differences in the approach that we've taken, I just wanted to explain that what we might call a standard evaluation, which uses basic theory, would take a fairly linear approach. So that would very much focus on outcomes or long-term changes that arise from the activities and interventions that are delivered by a service. So very much coming back to this service model that Josh walked us through a minute ago, just thinking about like what are the outcomes that are achieved by these activities. If we can move to the next slide. So here we can see that really to address the aims of this specific project, we wanted to go beyond just measuring outcomes. As Grace said, we were very much focused on the ideas about what drives change within the Greenhouse to work out what was working, who for and why. And understanding how those outcomes came about in terms of contextual factors, which might be social factors, might be within the organisation or within the environment that an organisation works within. So thinking about all those things that affect the Greenhouse and how people interact with the organisation. Also those activities, so any interventions that are provided to young people and families, as we saw in the previous slide, but also things like internal initiatives that shape the way that the Greenhouse operates and the experiences of people who work there. And then the really kind of key bit, I suppose, is thinking about mechanisms. So while these are things that we often can't see or measure directly, they might be things like initial responses to activities and the sort of underlying reasons that those activities create change. And rather than having that straight linear line, as in the previous slide, these factors all influence each other and they all combine to shape the outcomes from a programme. So we have captured our understanding of these elements, which show how the greenhouse activities lead to change, and how this process varies across contexts in a programme theory, which is shown on the next slide, and Grace will walk us through that.
Well, just before I share a little bit more about our programme theory, we thought we'd start by just giving you some key headlines about the service data that we analysed. So the data showed us that children, young people and their parents and carers highly rated the quality of support they received from the greenhouse. And in particular, they really valued the therapeutic aspects of support, such as feeling listened to and being taken seriously. And close to all of those that were surveyed said that they would recommend the greenhouse to others who were in a similar circumstance to them. When we also looked at sort of changes between people's sort of clinical measures before and after engaging with different programmes, we observed change in clinical measures where there was meaningful reductions in psychological distress and trauma symptoms for young people. But we did note the mean scores at follow-up did remain above probable clinical thresholds. And then finally, parents and carers who access direct family support reported that they found it validating. It enabled them to increase their understanding of abuse and how to support and connect with their children. Now, over the next few slides, this is where we really wanted to focus our attention today, we will share the programme theory of the greenhouse. And this is really intended to guide the service in further developing its activities, but also providing a blueprint for other organisations who might be keen to develop and innovate in relation to meeting the needs of children, young people and their families after abuse. Now, at this point, I just want to highlight that we identified 5 core mechanisms at play in how change might be achieved. So we've got choice, voice, family and community approach, the workforce, and evidence-led change. And we're going to share more about these in a moment. But in our next slide, we'll see a diagram, which is the logic model, which you'll be able to zoom into within the report and read more detail. And I just wanted to highlight at this point how it can be helpful in how we understand how the model works. So you'll see on the left-hand side, we've got several high inputs, and these are the resources that are required to enable core activities. So this includes the people, the funding, materials, the partnerships and infrastructures that are really key. And next we have activities, which are the core programmes or action programmes that the greenhouse then undertake. Our outputs are what the programmes produce, so including immediate and tangible outputs, followed by outcomes, which are our short and medium changes that occur. And then finally, we have impacts, which are those longer term systemic changes, which sometimes tend to be less within a service's control, but they are essentially our ultimate goals. And then you'll see here on the right-hand side, the mechanisms, which we're going to spend time thinking about now, these 5 core mechanisms that we found at play in how that change was achieved. And I'm going to hand over to Sarah to help us think about the first one, which is about choice.
So choice was one of the really fundamental aspects that we found running through all the provision at the greenhouse. It's framed as a child-centred partnership, as in the bottom quote from one of our professional contributors, because help for the survivor is at the centre of this work. But it's important to note that flexible and individualised support was evident in all aspects of the work that we explored with within the greenhouse provision. Providing clear, information to support decision making, and showing young people and their families that their preferences have been heard and honoured was very central within this work to building trusting relationships. And this extended far beyond the therapy room. Every interaction, the honours agency, there was evidence that this contributed to healing by countering the disempowerment of abuse, and this had the potential to promote further engagement with support, both now and into the future. And I think importantly, we found that centering choice isn't necessarily about offering 20 wildly different things, and it doesn't have to be expensive. People told us how much they valued really simple things like the freedom to decide how and when things happen, the order that they access different support, the different crafts and activities that they got involved with, right down to the choice of what they were going to talk about in an individual therapy session, as the Lyra, one of our young contributors, spoke about in this first quote. Also things like whether to access the next available parent group or to wait until a child is receiving support. And these were quite fundamental ways that the service offer was able to respond to the diverse needs of different families accessing the service, without needing to have a very complicated or expensive offer within that. And that really just showed how choice could be embedded without needing a huge amount of resource within that. Next slide, and Grace will talk us through voice.
So voice was another fundamental mechanism of how the model worked. We saw the power of creating opportunities to amplify the voices and ideas of young people and families to shape service delivery and improvement. And if lived experience is meaningfully embedded in organisational decision making, then we found that services and the narratives around child sexual abuse can be more responsive and less stigmatizing, because lived experience-led insights can challenge dominant assumptions and centre real needs. We also found from the work that when individuals are supported to draw on their lived experience and contribute to wider change, it really had an impact on their greater confidence. It impacted the way in which they saw their sense of self. Because from being able to make meaning from their experience and helping others, it really empowered them. We also heard from a number of people that when activities related to voice actually produce very sort of visible impacts and tangible outputs, survivors felt valued and really motivated to keep engaging, feeling inspired to use the skills and the confidence that they had developed in other areas of their lives. And we'll see from this quote from Jodie. Jodie shared that because of her experience at the voice group at the greenhouse, this opened up other opportunities for her to feed into school guidance in relation to child sexual abuse. So she says, I got to help with the guidance for schools. That was a massive deal for me. I was like, someone's actually listened. It's been used in hundreds of schools in the country. It was really cool because I've always had these feelings, just not had the opportunity to put them somewhere. We also found that enabling individuals to safely connect in groups to facilitate creative expression and shared understanding also enabled them to feel less isolated, but also more connected to others through voice. Because that shared understanding arising from those similar experiences really normalised those feelings and created a sense of community. So Maddie said, it's helped me to grow up. I'm more life experience and meeting people that I can relate to. And it just helped me grow as a person, and my confidence has grown massively. And I think we found from the work as well that developing responsive interventions and services that addresses the priorities of the communities that we're serving really requires contributions from people throughout an organisation and also the wider community too. And I think voice-led service improvement can really come from every conversation that we have, every layer of that ecological model. Next slide, Josh.
So we know that the ripple effects of sexual abuse spread far beyond the person who's been abused, and the greenhouse's decision to take a family and community approach really recognises that and reflects the idea that the response to the harm that's been caused should also take that collective approach. So this includes direct work with parents and carers and other professionals involved with the family, as well as indirect work such as supporting parents in responding to the needs of other children in the family. This sort of, I guess, as the amount of time that a family is going to have contact with a service is always quite limited, taking this broader approach really means that the impacts of the work can endure beyond the number of weeks that a family is in contact with any formal service. Particularly within the greenhouse's approach, we noticed that the separate working relationships for parents and carers that were very boundaried and separate from the support that the children received helped parents to receive the support that they needed. And this work really focused on boosting self-efficacy and well-being so parents and carers could be available for their children. The parent quoted in the top quote on the slide says, my family support practitioner spent the first session or two taking the time to convince me that I'm worth it. She didn't just tell me I was wrong. She didn't tell me I was wrong in my feelings, just tried to reframe things. It swings around the perspective. The way that my child is going to get through this is by me putting on my oxygen mask. So really helping parents to have that oxygen mask. And this also in several cases includes facilitating access to external support for parents' own past traumatic experiences. We also heard how opportunities to connect with other parents and carers within psychoeducational groups was very important for validating parents' experiences and feeling stopping that feeling of being alone, and also countering feelings of self-blame and building self-compassion through compassion for others and helping others as a way of making positive change out of the experiences that have happened. And professionals told us that even if they didn't work directly with family members, that they were always considering children in relation to those around them and thinking about where they might need extra support or where there was opportunities to get involved and improve the responses that they might have, recognising that potentially in professional context, this would have like longer term impacts for other young people who might have contact with a service or professionals and also benefit from that improved response. Next slide.
So we found that workforce safety, value and growth can really create the confidence and stability that is needed for consistent, high quality trauma-informed practice within an organisation. And we observed that the level of trauma expertise across the greenhouse workforce really set the service apart from other organisations in a way that was noticed by young people and their families. Particularly the relational nature of child sexual abuse and the relational approach in supporting young people and families is important to mirror in the workforce. And we found that the relational orientation of the organisation, where people feel supported, valued and heard, can enable systems and workforces to navigate change well and in a supportive way for employees, just as for young people after abuse. Within the model, there was recognition that doing this work is challenging and it impacts everyone and requires additional care at an organisational level to ensure that the demands on the workforce don't harm the workforce and also they don't harm the young people and families that they're serving. So having an organisation and a leadership team that is committed to securing the resources, the informal and formal infrastructures and initiatives to support the well-being, self-care, reflection and safety of the workforce was highlighted as critical. We also found as well that stability is vital for this workforce to be able to support its young clients and their families and to operate well. And leadership was identified as very much a key ingredient to that. Important to that was a leadership team and an organisation that really understood the challenging climate of the sector, a team that remained committed to its visions and values, was adaptable, and was one that maintained those strong relationships with funders and commissioners too. And then finally, we're going to move on to our final mechanism, which is about evidence-led change.
So the greenhouse also stood out from other organisations in its use of data, its efforts to increase buy-in among staff for evaluation, which had a knock-on effect of boosting data quality, and the way that service level decision-making was guided by both internal and external data. The skills and insights contributed by the research and data experts within the organisation were crucial to enabling the organisation to go beyond meeting reporting requirements and to proactively explore opportunities for the leadership team to consider service improvement opportunities and considering how the impacts of these changes could be evaluated. Our conversations showed that the external reputation of the greenhouse as being research-led inspired trust from external stakeholders, including funders, showing that the organisation was committed to delivering best practice. And as the bottom quote showed, we found examples where this had drawn in additional funding. So this practitioner says there was one bid in particular for the voice work where the fact that we presented that we would be using the money to both expand and update what we do, and we would be evaluating that as we go, was a real plus. Young people and family members also expressed a lot of enthusiasm for involvement in research, demonstrated by their willingness to contribute to this evaluation, but also to wider opportunities to contribute to research and really add to that wider evidence base around understanding child sexual abuse and what constitutes effective support, and a long-term aim to improve the support that was available for other survivors. And we really felt that this was an extension of the activism of voice, and the opportunities to get involved in that were really went very much hand in hand with the other voice activities. Next slide.
We wanted to finish by sharing an overview of just some of the key recommendations arising from the work to guide service providers in their decisions about how to develop a service and to inform commissioners in their approach to funding services, and as they perhaps consider the potential wider rollout of this model in other regions. We also note that these recommendations and the ones that we outline in the report align closely with the priorities for commissioners that's been identified by the CSA Centre in their guidance on funding and commissioning child sexual abuse services. So just to briefly touch on these 6 then that we've pulled out. So the first one is around prioritise flexible person-centred support that enables choice and responds to individual needs. It's important for organisations, we think, to review how they are enabling those they support to make decisions about their own care, identifying opportunities to demonstrate an ethos of empowerment, and to consider how they might revisit choices over time, and to use a variety of methods to communicate about choices and making decisions. Services should be resourced and managed to provide that genuine flexibility and timing, location, pace and format of support for young people and families, including longer timeframes for support as well, thinking about how to tailor support for those with additional needs or disabilities, and really helping people have the choice over what is going to fit their circumstances and stage of journey. We recognise that there might be limitations to flexibility and choice, but by being transparent about these and communicating about these clearly, that can really build up trust with children and young people and their families. And even with limited resources, there are ways for organisations to create opportunities for choice and flexibility. Secondly, embedding and resourcing a voice-led approach. So we'd recommend consideration around what a whole organisation voice-led approach might look like, enabling staff, partners and community members across all layers of that ecological system to respond to community priorities, and recognising that improvement can emerge from having those everyday conversations, as well as having structures within an organisation to amplify voice work. And I think that really requires organisations to have the funding, infrastructures and leadership to develop and sustain voice work, where there is long-term investment in voice work to really embed it across strategic and operational activity, ensuring that lived experience can meaningfully shape every level of service design and decision making. Thirdly, from the evaluation, we saw the importance and value of investing in safe, creative group spaces for children and families. It played a huge part in their healing, and it enabled them to build connections with other people, knowing they weren't alone, having that shared understanding, being able to develop skills, and it really supported their personal growth and empowered many to have opportunities for ongoing change making. Fourthly, we really recognise the importance of having sufficient resources and support for workforces to ensure that well-being is actively protected and recognised and resourced as central to a service's quality and the impact that it has to support the safety and resilience of workforces, including those with their own lived experience of child sexual abuse. As I mentioned before, as CSA is fundamentally relational, workforce systems and organisational change must remain rooted in relationships, guided by the voices of young people and families. And having strong relational bonds can enable staff wellbeing and organisational change in the same way that they support healing after abuse. And I think we found as well that working in the area of child sexual abuse really does require courage at all levels of an organisation. And having leaders who are visibly present, who are able to pair that sort of inspiration with realism, who can be adaptable, who can communicate honestly about the pressures of working in the sector is really key to sustaining that. And our fifth recommendation that we highlight here is around advocating funding sustainable delivery, increasing capacity for prevention and outreach work, really identifying the importance of supporting that whole family and community work, and recognising that more funding and that protected time is needed to reach out to groups and communities that might experience greater barriers to care and support after child sexual abuse. We also found as well that I think in light of the challenging funding landscape and to ensure sustainability of organisations, it's recommended that investment in an organisation's infrastructure, particularly around supporting research and measuring impact, is key, where members of the whole organisation, including those in the leadership team, as well as funders and trustees, recognise the importance of supporting research and evidence in order to articulate the way in which a service is having that impact. And finally, improving data quality and evaluating impact work. Good quality evidence and data, they're crucial for developing services that speak to the needs of young people and families. Part of this work might involve organisations working with frontline staff to emphasise the importance of high quality data and ensure that it's usable internally and externally. And where evidence-informed service developments have been implemented by service, we'd really recommend that that is shared as case studies or as best practice examples for the sector, to be sharing all the good work that is going on. We recognise that services are sitting on a wealth of data, and we would welcome conversations around government initiatives to work with services nationally to bring the data together, building that rich data set and a much needed profile of young people accessing services, ensuring that children are seen in the national picture and that we're utilising data that has already been collected. And finally, as part of this, we recognise that survivors contributing to research and seeing the impact of research involvement is really that extension of voice. And we'd encourage organisations to think about how they might facilitate young people and families to be involved in research projects, not just as participants, but as those actively shaping what the research looks like. because their involvement can not only inform research direction, but it enables the integrity and safety of the research, all contributing to the wider evidence base on effective support for children and young people. So in summary then, we found that the greenhouse model demonstrates how a holistic, a creative, evidence-led and trauma-informed approach can support meaningful healing for young people and their families. And by placing them at the centre, by fostering choice, amplifying their voices, the model can build that confidence, trust and collective empowerment, challenging the societal stigma around child sexual abuse. And I really believe that the ecological focus of the model recognises the wider impacts of abuse, and it really strengthens whole families to support healing. We recognise as well that having a workforce that is relational and courageous, as well as key stakeholders such as funders and partners who recognise what's needed to safely hold this work with care, is fundamental to this work. And these elements all together really highlight how interactions at every level can play a key role in healing and improving outcomes for children and families, so that children and their families don't have to hold their experiences alone. We hope that has been helpful for you as a little overview of the evaluation. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Grace, and thank you, Sarah, as well. Before we go on to questions, I just wanted to share with you some of our next steps here at the greenhouse. One of those is around the voices that we aren't hearing, and the children and young people that we aren't seeing through our service. So we want to increase visibility of the service, particularly in our local communities. So as part of that, we are looking to get involved in more kind of local events, and also we're aiming to produce research briefings that focus on specific client groups. The first of those is going to be looking at boys and young men, and that will draw on our own data, and also looking at across research at what works, so we can see what we're doing well and where we can improve, and we'll be publishing those on our website. We're also looking at development of our voice offer. So we have our new voice team that's been busy over the last few months putting together a new offer for clients. And built into our service model is responsiveness to what we're being told. And voice is such a big part of that. So we've always listened to what our children, young people, parents and carers have told us. And now we're in the process of setting up a new advisory board that will allow members to feed directly into service development. We strongly believe that our team are our greatest strength, and we remain committed to strengthening the well-being, retention and development of our staff across the team, with actions around this coming out of a recent staff survey that we ran. We're also looking at strengthening communication within the team and feedback loops as well across the organisation, creating more meaningful opportunities for staff to share their experiences and insights, mainly with the senior leadership team. We are also looking into the possibility of completing a full service evaluation, including looking at potentially a social return on investment within that. And then also, finally, the biggest one, sharing far and wide. So hopefully you'll see that there are lots of learnings for us, but there's also lots of learning for everyone else within the sector. So we will be sharing that, and we will hope that you will share that too. And hopefully you've got out of today, and when you get to reading the report, you'll see there's lots of learning in there for all areas of the sector. So we'll be sharing that as much as we can. So next up, we are moving on to Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see everyone. There you go. And yeah, I don't know whether we've had any questions through in the chat already. What we'll do is, yeah, if people want to put their hands up for questions, write in the chat, however you want to do it. Michelle, I can see you've got your hand up first there. I'll let you go.
Thanks, Josh. It's just a quick question for Grace and for Sarah. You said something along the lines of the mean, I'm trying to think of the exact description, the mean scores that follow up. Can you just give me a bit more sort of insight into that? And the second question, I might as well ask both of them at the same time, is government initiatives using the data. What opportunities do you think already exist that we could use to actually be part of that?
Okay, I am happy to start with the first question, Michelle. Thank you so much. So from the analysis that we looked at, whilst we did see that sort of change, I guess an improvement in people's sort of outcomes, is seeing that perhaps there were reductions in people's sort of clinical sort of outcomes where we would want to be seeing sort of healing. I think what we did find, because the evaluation sort of surveys were taken before the intervention and afterwards, when they were conducted in that sort of post-intervention phase, we didn't see them sort of dropping below the sort of clinical threshold. So I think if there had been, for example, sort of longer term follow-up, we might see actually someone might not have sort of a clinical threshold for something like PTSD. And I think that really shows within evaluation, it's great to see people's outcomes on the way that we would hope they would go. But because we didn't have that sort of longer term follow-up, we can't say it's necessarily dropped as much as we'd want. So I hope that kind of answers that. We just wanted to be transparent about what we found in terms of that reduction. And then, sorry, what was your second question?
My second question is, one of you said that but government, I think you said, Grace, government initiative for using the data.
Yes.
And I suppose my question is there something going on at the moment that we could actually get involved in? Is there some approach we should be making? Or is it just that opportunity could exist, it just isn't being used yet?
I mean, other colleagues, go on, Sarah, do you want to start?
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I think one of the things that we particularly realised was, every single individual organisation has this wealth of data that they're required to report to their various funders about the work that they're doing and the outcomes that's having. But there's no, it's never joined up. So there's no national picture, there's no national data set in the way that in sort of fairly similar sectors like the domestic abuse sector, there are national data sets. So you can look at more national trends and you can get a sense of the way that organisations are working more nationally. And we think that that's a real missed opportunity to do that with all of the data we've got about child sexual abuse, to really build that picture. And it is something that we know that the CSA Centre have explored in the past. It's not something that's currently kind of at the top of their agenda. But it's something that we would certainly be pushing for and exploring opportunities.
So we should be saying to the government, you're making decisions without the right data to support you. So let us pull everybody together and let's give you the numbers and the information that you need. I mean, that's effectively what you're saying. Yeah.
The decision making across the board would be improved if we could see all of that data together. Yeah.
Really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, next up we have Janet.
Thank you. Thank you for a really interesting presentation and very heartening for us. My question's kind of linked to Michelle's, which is what's your role next? You've really got some incredibly valuable information here, which is obviously valuable to us, and we can do something with it. But what about you? What's your next step with this?
Thanks so much, Janet. I think part of our role as, researchers, we're always very keen to ensure that our research doesn't just sit on a shelf and it can make a difference. And I think opportunities like this webinar with people on the call that, I think our commissioners and part of the government to hear what we've had to say, we really hope that we'll be able to continue those conversations. So just say that we are keen to explore that further. And I think going forward next, we would be really keen, to work with the greenhouse about how we might work together to share the findings. I don't know, Josh, if you want to share about what's coming up sort of next in terms of how we might be able to, disseminate this work further, or maybe there are more sort of targeted ways to reach people with those messages. Have you got any additions there?
Only that we're going to start discussing that in the next couple of weeks. Yes. So there are ongoing conversations around that for sure. Once Catherine, our new CEO, starts, we'll be having discussions with her and bringing her in, and we will be putting lots of things in place in terms of getting that out there.
Yeah, and the other thing to say as well that we have created a sort of accessible summary, so working with young people and parents and carers to really distill some of those key messages that we've brought, so that we hope that if someone is interested to find out more about the findings from the work, they can read that summary, and that can be a start of a further conversation in a more accessible way. Thank you.
I can also think of opportunities within our research team where members sit on steering groups and panels kind of guiding other developments that might be happening. So around the National Child House rollout, both for children and young people and parents and carers. We have members within our team who are involved with that. So we'll have that opportunity to feed our learning from this project into those spaces as well. We'll always be looking for opportunities. Any room that we're in, we'll have the opportunity to contribute the findings from this.
Well, thank you. We have a question in the chat from Katie E, who asks, were there conversations with young people and parents about whether they'd want to be named in the research or not? Maybe Sarah, you could take that one.
We didn't explicitly discuss with them whether they would want to be named using their real names. We did talk to them about how they would like to be attributed. And when that conversation happened, we didn't have anybody who was very particularly keen to use their real name or have that kind of attributed to them, as they may well be in other areas of their life quite vocal activists, or they may have social media presence and be quite open about that in relation to their their name or who they are. We offered the opportunity to choose the name that would be attributed, and when that conversation happened, nobody said that they were keen to use their real names. So that's why we made that choice to use pseudonyms. Many of them were selected by the individual, some people were not bothered, and so we did choose those in those instances. I hope that's answered that question.
Thank you, Sarah. And within our kind of internally, and when we share stuff at the greenhouse, sometimes young people do, or parents as well, do want to share either their first name or an initial, and we will talk through that with them and make sure they realize kind of, particularly if it's going online, make sure they realize the kind of impact of that, and the fact that once it's up online, then it's there, and making sure they understand the risks of that. So next up, before I go to Holly, there's another question in the chat from Olivia Martin, who asks, can you tell me a bit more about your plans for further evaluation, including what methods you're planning to use? So I think, in terms of evaluation methods, I can touch a little bit on that, and then maybe Grace and Sarah, if you want to jump in as well. In terms of the way that we evaluate our services, we do it in very kind of a mixed method approach. So we have kind of set tools that Grace and Sarah both talked about in terms of core and cries. We also have feedback forms that are a bit more qualitative and focus a bit more on kind of the service that's been provided. And we also conduct interviews as well. So rather than just having forms completed, we will also, over the phone, online, sometimes in person, talk with parents and young people to get their thoughts. So yeah, I see any kind of further evaluation kind of continuing along those lines. And I think, yeah, I mentioned as well that we would be really interested in looking at social return on investment. I think that would play quite a big part in any kind of further evaluation. The Greenhouse has done one before, but it was back in 2017, I believe, when the service was very different, as we touched on at the start. So doing that and kind of rerunning that with this new model, now that we've seen kind of the impacts of that, thanks to Grace and her team, I think will be really valuable moving forward. I don't know whether, yeah, Grace or Sarah, you have anything you want to add on that?
The only other thing, I think what we sort of see from research across the sector really is it would be great if we're able to demonstrate, I guess, that sort of longitudinal impact of people's healing and what happens over a longer period of time, and looking at those sort of long-term outcomes. That could be something that is explored. And as I said earlier, I think if we're able to involve the children, young people and parents and carers within shaping the plans for evaluation and really having their voices at the heart of, what is the research direction, what methods would work for them, that would be a real strength as well.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, hopefully that's answered your question. Holly, I see you've put your hand down, so maybe your question was answered in that. And I can see we're about 1 minute to 2. So I think if there aren't any more questions, we'll stop there. And yeah, just thank you for spending the time to listen. Meg, I believe reports are on their way. Have they been sent?
Absolutely, yeah. You should have all had a copy to your inbox, copies of the service valuation report via a link and a summary. I'll resend them afterwards. We'll also share the webinar recording of this for any colleagues that missed it. And if you have any questions, we'd be glad to receive them from the email that goes out to you all. And just to finish up by saying a huge thank you, Grace, Sarah and Josh, for today's presentation, but also for the huge amount of time that you and your teams dedicated to this piece of work. We're delighted.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you.